and I'd also just like to wish everybody a happy International Women's Day. Although this annual session for International Women's Day is really welcome and it's a chance to highlight the issues impacting girls and women, I have to wonder if I could just dust off last year's speech and give it again, because what has changed in the meantime? The government's announcement of the referendum removing the constitutional reference to a woman's place being in the home, I think says it all. That's the kind of great, meaningful act for International Women's Day. That recommendation, I mean, it's incredible that it's still in our Constitution in 2023. The recommendation was made by the Citizens' Assembly on Gender Equality in 2021, almost 2 years ago. And while I do welcome the referendum, its delay and its announcement today, I think, just reeks of cynicism. Can the government claim for 1 second that it's interested in the well-being of women and girls when you're ending the ban on the evictions, the one policy that's stopping many one-parent families from becoming homeless? We know they're disproportionately affected by homelessness. Despite making up just 20% of families in Ireland, one-parent families make up over 55% of homeless families, and the vast majority of those one-parent families are women being the parents. And then still, on the week of International Women's Day, the government's opening up the floodgates for them and other families to become homeless. I don't know if it's more hypocritical or callous, but I know there are hundreds of women and girls who will be worse off this week because of this government. Here are some of the things that you could be announcing for International Women's Day. A properly resourced strategy to tackle gender-based violence. Gardaí responded to almost 54,000 domestic abuse incidents last year, and yet the state provides less than 1/3 of the necessary refuge spaces. The government's proposed domestic violence leave is half of the international standard. Sexual, relationship and consent education is antiquated, and the Minister for Education has basically said it's optional, so letting young people learn about sex and relationships online rather than training and resourcing teachers in schools to do that. Next, you could be prioritising women and girls' healthcare. There's a common thread in many of the health issues that I have to raise in this House: the under-resourcing and lack of even basic respect for women's health rights. Treatment for menopause are still inadequate. The levels of information and support are very poor, and there are still shortages of HRT medication. Women suffering hyperemesis also face considerable barriers in accessing medicines to relieve this chronic condition. Free contraception for women should mean that pharmacists should be able to supply oral contraceptives without the need for a GP prescription. And the HSE's attempt to massively restrict home births is still a very distinct possibility. All of these things are connected. The state still does not understand or properly support women's healthcare. Another thing you could be announcing today, Minister, the most decent thing you could do on International Women's Day, is to give justice to all survivors of mother and baby homes and illegal adoptions. The horrific and criminal treatment of girls and women at the hands of the church and state in these institutions is unimaginable. Survivors deserve justice. The public are behind them. The government's redress scheme intentionally excludes whole categories of survivors, arbitrarily deciding their suffering and human rights violations don't merit any kind of reparation. I'm using this opportunity to ask again, Minister, for you to do the right thing. The redress bill is going through the Seanad soon, so there's still time to listen to survivors, to listen to human rights experts, and to listen to the general public, and to expand the scheme to include all survivors. Finally, if you're serious about the announcements of the referendum replacing the reference to a woman's place being in the home, what material difference will that actually make in terms of women being in the home? I welcome the symbolic importance, but what impact will it actually have on families? Because in the middle of a housing crisis with increasing bills, that's what ordinary people will be asking. The reality of the matter is that section in the Constitution is pretty accurate, because our state and social and healthcare services are based on the assumption that there is a woman in the home full-time. Childcare, disability services, caring for older parents, in each of these areas the state only provides a fraction of the support required, There are considerable staff shortages, social and healthcare professionals are emigrating or moving to other professions, and of course, men fulfil some caring roles, but let's be honest, we all know that these obligations mainly fall on women. Childcare is such an obvious example. For years, exorbitant costs have meant it was more economic for one parent to stop working. In the vast majority of cases, that is the mother. For some women, that's their choice. It should always be a choice, but not a decision forced on them by government failure. Childcare is symptomatic of the larger issue. The de facto government policy for decades has been to base social and healthcare policy off the idea of a woman being there in the home. Changing the constitution might look good, but what actual difference will it make? And I actually don't think it looks that good in 2023 to announce it with great fanfare. It's embarrassing that it's still in our constitution. What we need to prevent women from having to be in the home and that holding women back in terms of their career is a massive, radical change in how public services are delivered. Our health and social services need proper investment in staffing. This will not only help the people directly involved, it will also help relieve the massive pressure on women and men providing care. International Women's Day is a day of celebration, but it's also a day of extreme frustration, protest and activism. In 365 days' time, I imagine I'll be standing before you again. It will be International Women's Day 2024, and the chances are I'll be bringing up the same points as I have today because little or no action will have been taken. I look forward to a time in this country when issues like domestic violence, women's healthcare and justice for survivors are not treated as fringe and tokenistic, but as urgent and essential.
Next is Deputy Breed Smith, 6 minutes, sharing with Deputy.